Alright, so before the video begins, I just want to say that everything in this video is based on my personal opinion. You know, I wrote all of these myself off the top of my head, so just take it with a grain of salt, you know. It might not align with your opinion, and of course, that's natural. Also, I have a Discord server if you want to join that, and enjoy the video. Blackout and Criminality are two very similar yet drastically different games, with one being once branded as the criminality killer despite never actually becoming so. Today I'll be comparing the two games from a set of different criterias: the game's gameplay loop or replayability, its optimization, its map, its content variety, its visuals, its PvP and balancing, its community, and finally its development support. So first, we have gameplay loop / replayability. In both Crim and Blackout, they have somewhat similar gameplay loops. You grind money, you spend all that money killing people. However, at the same time, they're also slightly different. So let's begin with Criminality. Criminality's gameplay loop consists of mainly just killing people. Some might not even bother grinding for cash, as if you're just good enough you can profit with simply killing other players. There's not much else to this, as most players just spend their time roaming the map killing anybody on site, since there really isn't anything else to do in the game. If one decides that they want to grind for cash, they would either kill people if they're skilled enough, or turn Crim into a simulator and open a shit ton of saves, or also get valuables to turn in by repeatedly searching from piles on the ground. Besides the decently repetitive arcade shooter strategy for gaining cash, the save method is extremely boring, since the entire strategy is to run around the map in a circle over and over again, looting the same saves with the same lockpick mechanism. Now let's get to Blackout's gameplay loop. Blackout's gameplay loop is slightly different, with its method of earning cash from PvP being slightly more difficult and also the cash grind being decently less repetitive in comparison to Crim's. First, the PvP loop. It is somewhat similar to Crim's, consisting of the player dying, buying guns, going back, getting kills, and then dying again, and repeating the same exact process. However, unlike Crim, you do not get money off kills, and bounties are not instantly claimed. The amount of cash you can get will be dropped on the person you killed, scaling with the cost of their items when they died. If you ask me, this system that was implemented in Blackout is much better than Crim's kill somebody and get their bounty system. It's much more sophisticated and also rewards players for winning fights that obviously has the odds against them. At the same time, this also forces players to think more tactically, whether they need to retreat in a fight to redeem those valuables, or if you wish to farm cash directly. However, you can also take the path of doing either cargo ambush or green key cards, which requires you to complete a 1v1 PV minigame. You can then keep doing these screen cards to get other ones such as red, orange, and blue, with orange though being the one that will be able to open a lab which contains a lot of valuables you can redeem, and also a lot of weaponry that's sitting inside as well. I believe this cash farming process is somewhat repetitive, but at the same time carries a lot more depth than Crim's, and also encourages players to take other farming routes as well, which I will be going into later. Now let's talk about optimization. This will of course be one of the much shorter criterias because there's obviously not a lot to talk about here. First, in Criminality, I believe the game is much less demanding to run in comparison to Blackout, which makes the game much more accessible to most, if not all, players. I could peak around 500 FPS max on full graphics in a small server. Like Crim, Blackout is much newer, which has a system that is decently well optimized, but at the same time, it is still fairly demanding for players to run. Some players that could run Crim to a satisfactory extent may not be able to do so in Blackout, with many players being forced to run the game at more or even less than 30 FPS average. I could peak around 300 FPS max on full graphics on a small server. Next, I will be covering the maps of the two games. First, I would say that Blackout and Crim's maps are both very different in terms of both aesthetics and also gameplay. First, let's talk about Criminality's map. The map in Crim is much less detailed compared to Blackout. However, this allows the point of interest on the map to shine, giving each part of the map its own individual identity. This also makes it so that the map seems like it has much more variety, like you're actually going to different places when you walk around the map. Gameplay wise, Crim's map also shines. The map in general is decently simple, with some rooftops around and very long and wide roads spanning across the entire map. This allows players to move around different areas while also being able to consider their surroundings without much fuss, which is also a great addition to the game's PvP. In Blackout, the map is much more detailed and much less simplistic compared to Crim's. Blackout's map gives a dystopian hellhole vibe, with low-rise apartments placed around the map side by side. Each part of the map has a similar color scheme, making the player feel like they're trapped in the walls of an industrial hellhole. The points of interest in Blackout also blends in with its surroundings. Locations such as the military base and vulture base pretty much merge into the apartments besides it, which does not give the player a very strong impression of their locations, and makes them much less unique. All in all, the point of interests in Blackout doesn't shine much, being completely overshadowed by their surrounding environment. This does not benefit the PvP either. Due to the oversaturation of low-rise apartments, players tend to stay and traverse from location to location on rooftops only, which is not a good thing balancing and gameplay-wise. In Criminality, you actually have to look around when you move from building to building, as you will be much more vulnerable on the ground. However, Blackout pretty much removes that, since for the most part you can just stay on apartment roofs and never leave. Next, I will be talking about content variety. In this section, I'm basically just gonna compare how much there is to each game, what you could possibly do and what the game contains. Again, we will begin with Criminality. Things you can do in Criminality consists of killing people with easily purchasable guns, limited spawning ones from the rebel dealer, and there are also some stuff that you can get from the airdrops. There are also the crates that spawn right beside you, red ones and green ones. The spawns coming from those crates will also give you guns, and also the scraps that drop objects that you can turn in for cash. Besides this, there are also event items and limited items. Examples of this are the Slayer kit, the X24 potion, and of course, a lot of other ones that I'm sure you can all recall, as I cannot do that myself off the top of my head. There are also skins that are only obtainable from loot crates, which I hate even though I have a pretty bad gambling addiction, since promoting skin crate gambling despite knowing that your audience is mostly made up of children is probably the shittiest thing a dev could possibly do. Besides this, there are also two other game modes, being Brawl and Infection, with Brawl being heavily disliked by most players, while Infection is the game mode that some people actually enjoy. Both of these game modes introduce new maps to the game as well. Now moving on to Blackout's content. The game, unlike Criminality, does not have any special game modes, just the online mode only, which is understandable as it is still in paid testing. Blackout's general PvP content is also similar to Crim's. Buy guns, run back, and die. Now let's look at Blackout's own stuff. So first we have weekly and daily quests, not something big, but it adds on to the progression since it also scales with the player's level. There are also quests and a faction system. The quests are a decently good way to gain cash and keycards, however a big purpose of this is to also allow players to join factions. The factions would be rebels and vultures, and as of now they do not have much content to them besides two bases that you could enter. However, there's a lot of content potential for factions in the future, since the game is still obviously in development. Now, besides all these, there is now the most important feature of Blackout, keycards and raids. The game has 4 main raids, being military base, bunker, labs, and metro. All of these areas serve different purposes. Military base gives new players a place to gather better loot easily. Metro allows players to get a bunch of keycards, giving access to labs and bunkers. Labs can be opened with an orange keycard, with lots of valuables and weapons inside, also giving drop chances for flares, which could be used to call in more keycards or high tier guns. Bunkers can also be opened with blue keycards, allowing players to gather guns and also cash. However, bunkers tend to be used for its contraband crates, which gives high tier weaponry such as the photon accelerator, and also for the red waves, which give drop chances for operator armor pieces. Blackout also will seemingly be getting drones in the future given the recent sneak peeks, but the purpose and usage of these are not yet confirmed. I would just like to point out here that in general I would say Blackout is currently slightly lacking in content compared to Crim. However, with a singular update, it will easily top the content that Crim currently offers. And I expect Blackout to keep getting more and more content in the future given how the current updates are going. Now let's talk about the visuals or graphics of these two games. In this part, I will be comparing the two games' visuals regarding the map, a bit on lighting models, and obviously also their animations. These things are all obviously extremely subjective, so you can just skip this part if you want to. First, in Criminality. I hate the gambling system, but some of the skins actually look pretty nice with max graphics, especially when you look at them below lighting. The default weapon models are also pretty nice as well. The lighting is also something I like. However, I do not like how the map is, given its style and design, which in my opinion is a bit lacking in detail. I also dislike the animations in Crim as of now. I prefer the old ones much more, and in my opinion, the new ones feel extremely bubbly and weightless. Now let's talk about Blackout's graphics. Compared to Crim, I like Blackout's map design much more, especially taking into consideration that the game has seasonal changes. I love winter. In terms of most weapon models, I must say I like Crim's more given the skins. However, a few weapons such as the photon accelerator I believe look much better than anything that you can find in Crim. Next, let's talk about the two games' PvP and balancing. Originally, I was going to separate PvP and balancing as two different topics. However, I figured it'll take less time for me to just put them together since mainly these two topics have a pretty strong correlation. First, let's look into Crim's PvP and balancing. Actually, more of just PvP balancing. Crim's been around for a while, having a good amount of changes to guns and also some new ones being added to the game from time to time. For the most part, I'd say Crim's balancing is pretty good. The TTK is extremely fast, and pretty much all the guns are viable, with some requiring a higher skill level to be used more effectively than others. Things such as the double barrel shotgun or the DB originally was able to one tap for 104 or 106 damage full body shots, so basically a one tap. However, now it only does 96 full body shots. This is just an example of how Crim's balancing processes, which definitely is not that bad. However, they added the stupid fucking golden skins and shit that made some guns stupidly broken, such as the golden DB, which now one taps to the body. For the most part, Criminality is pretty welcoming for all weapons. I'd say melees are pretty good as well, since there's obviously a bunch of other items such as the rage dose that goes pretty well with melees. Now with Crim's actually pretty good balancing out of the way, let's talk about Blackout, which to be honest is new, so of course the balancing in general is going to be much worse. First, unlike Criminality, Blackout's TTK is generally much slower. Therefore, there is a much more obvious difference between high tier and low tier guns. At the same time, people use armor in Blackout way more than people would in Crim. Why? Because armor in Blackout has pretty much zero downsides. They do not need repairing, and they do not give you any speed debuffs either. And this stretches out the guns in the game way more, since this makes penetration actually matter. And of course, low level unlocked SMGs and pistols will always have much lower penetration compared to higher level locked rifles. The balancing is generally fine for the most part if players are PvPing at the same level. However, when you do take differently leveled players into account, it fully favors the players with a higher level. Besides this, Blackout also has contraband weapons and items. I won't go into the contraband weapons too deeply. However, I will mainly be covering the operator kit, which pretty much gives you a full body armor with 2 times the protection of normal heavy armor, which in fact is very broken. It is possible to kill them, but it tends to be decently difficult for most players depending on the skill level of the operator. Keep in mind this armor has pretty much zero downsides to it as well. I'll let you determine for yourself how this will affect gameplay and the experience of lower leveled players. Alright, next, let's talk about the two games' communities. Given the somewhat similar nature of both games, I must say the community is not the best for both of them as well. I'll try to briefly cover some correlated drama that might have happened in the past and focus mainly on how the community influences gameplay. Criminality has brought itself upon a lot of drama from both players and also devs. Many of these started from in-game drama, which could be as simple as someone dying to somebody else, though this isn't as correlated to the general gameplay. Due to Criminality's simple gameplay loop, most people that are familiar with the game simply play to kill. When they see someone, their natural reaction would be to shoot them or do whatever it takes to kill them. That's simply how the game works. It's not too beginner friendly, but due to how simple the gameplay loop is, it is not difficult to get into the game as a new player. However, the average player you meet in a server will not be very friendly to you, since the game is once again all about PvP. Unless you are playing casual servers, of course. I see people there being... It's basically what the game was like during 1.2, where like 15 people gather around a cafe and just talk to each other. Generally, you could say Blackout's community is not as bad as Criminality's. However, given how Blackout works as a game, the potential for the community to degrade isn't gonna do it too well. Unlike Crim, Blackout is much less of an arcade shooter, and it leans more towards to a looter shooter. This means that killing people at times may lead to, well, how can I put it? Altercations. You can imagine how some people would feel after losing an operator kit, photon blades, and etc. At times, it's not a good look. And of course, the most you'd be able to lose in Crim is like a tier 3 kit or a Slayer kit, which one could pretty easily be bought and the other one is literally just gonna kill itself after a set amount of time. And of course, there's also gangs that come with all of this. Good things usually don't come out of them fighting. A good example of this is how a lot of people dislike the gang and Blackout named the Malice for supposedly being toxic and some other stuff, but I'm not too familiar with that, but it's just an example. These events do not foster a good environment to play the game in. However, at the end of the day, you can always just get some close friends to play the game with and not interact with the community as much. And here we are finally on to our last point, which is development support. I will generally be going over the recent updates these two games both have had, and I will also be covering how dedicated and passionate their developers are regarding their games. Alright, first we have Crim. Where do we even start? Let's cover the last few updates. So we have the April Fool's update, the Valentine's update, and the Winter update. I'll also be covering the Summer update, which according to the devs was the largest Criminality update to date. First, the April Fool's update introduced a new limited weapon, the Eradicator, which has been in the game as an admin item for an extremely long time, dating all the way to over a year ago. This could be acquired by completing a difficult obby and vibe check. The update also came with a skin crate, which is the April Fool's skin crate, which was limited. The Valentine's update, well, it added, let's see, a new skin crate. What is that? A limited map and a limited item. Or what else? Gun case 5 today. Okay, that's gambling. Okay, a case skip, skin storage. Okay, skin storage game pass reworked. A golden deagle got serial numbers. Wow, would you look at that? Wait, where's the content that's not limited or isn't related to promoting gambling to kids on the internet? Oh, there's none? Alright, whatever. Let's look at the next update. Alright, so we got UGC event, fallen kit, relic item. Okay, those are pretty cool. And also an event. Alright, and some skins and, you know, 1 or 2 new items. Alright, that's pretty cool, I guess. Alright, now let's look at one of the supposedly largest updates for Crim up to date, which is the Summer update, aka update 2.0. Alright. Let's see. Alright, we got gun revamps, animation revamps, alright. Gun attachments and upgrades, alright, that's pretty cool. We got daily login, some new items, alright. We got movement changes and yeah, more skin crates. I don't think I'll have to go any further into this. I think you guys get my point. I really say just the devs of Crim doesn't see the game as something they truly want to work on anymore. It's kind of lost the feel that it's used to have in the past, and when the devs actually actively worked hard on the game and on the updates, and those that actually satisfied the player base. And I'd really just say update 1.3 was way larger than update 2.0. So I guess now I see the game with more of a cash grab now, and just basically zero new content being pushed out, despite mainly just skin crates and 1 or 2 new items once in a while. And maybe sometimes once in a while a limited item that's really just reskin year by year, which I don't think really adds onto the game much either. Alright, let's come to Blackout. So far, I'd say the Blackout updates that's been pushed out recently are some of the highest quality ones Roblox has ever known. Let's go through the ones that came out so far. The first update was around a month after initial release, and it added a new keycard, which was the green keycard, and an entire underground expansion alongside it. 2 new guns, a smoke grenade, and a new melee. And around a month later, a new contraband armor set, which was the operator set, was added. A new gun, 2 new helmets, and 2 new tasks, so some additions to guess factions. We also got some map changes, a new bunker expansion with a raid. That's basically an entirely new area, so the size of bunker got pretty much doubled. We also got new airdrops, capturable territories if you're in a faction, and also faction base raids, which are also basically the 2 new tasks. And now let's look at the most recent update. We got a new contraband sniper, which is the full-time accelerator. We also got flare guns, a small metro expansion where there was like a new military area. We got a Scrooge arena for melee 1v1s to get green key cards, and we also got a rooftop revamp. We got melee NPCs, 2 new guns, when you bladed weapon, and we also got melee attachments, which are Surge and Inferno. And at the same time, we also got 2 new tasks, which isn't that important. The most recent leaks from Silver also shows new drones, new weapons, and also additional mechanisms to factions. Overall, in the time it took for Blackout to get all this out, Criminality has gotten some new limited stuff, some very minuscule map changes that's been reverted most of the time, and a few new items, and of course, a lot of new skins. They just keep one thing they don't miss every single update are skin crates. Somehow. Alright, and we are finally down to the conclusion. So overall, is Blackout or Crim better? You might be disappointed, but I'd say the 2 games aren't directly comparable, because they're still very different at the same time, which was definitely not what people expected before Blackout's initial release. However, if we look at some areas that are more indirectly related to the game, such as the community and the development support, I'd say Blackout has a brighter future than Crim. However, if we look at areas that aren't directly related to the game's content, such as the community or the development support, I'd say Blackout has a brighter future than Crim. Crim's at where it pretty much will stay for the rest of eternity. However, Blackout's still quite new, and it's got a pretty long way to go, so we'll see, I guess. And of course, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It took me a while to make this, especially writing the entire script, and yeah, have a good day.